Good morning and welcome to the Football Digest podcast. Sorry about the slightly delayed kickoff. I think we'll be heading for a Premier League time, won't we? But yeah, I'm pleased you're with us now. A few technical issues this morning, but there'll be no stopping us from here on in. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by my Daily Mirror colleague, Chief Sports Writer Andy Dunn, Chief Sports Writer of the Daily Star, Jeremy Cross, and Matt Dunn, football aficionado of the Daily Express. Good morning, guys. Nice to have you with us. Absolutely plenty to discuss this week, isn't there, really? I don't think there's anything that kind of drives the discussion, gets us quite as excited as a really good week for English clubs in the Champions League. And what two fantastic semi-final results for firstly, Chelsea in Madrid, and then even better than that, Manchester City against PSG. We'll be having a look at that and their chances of completing the job. Surely, hopefully, they'll do that. Could we be heading for another all-English final in Istanbul this time? What a prospect that would be. What a turbulent week for Arsenal. If defeat to Everton wasn't bad enough, now the man behind Spotify is who rewards all music artists with 0.00001 for each play that they have. Is trying to sort of spin even more discs so he can buy Arsenal. And then we're going to have a look at the United Liverpool preview for this weekend as well. And we're going to finish on a recollection and pay homage to the week celebrating, 25 years? Can you believe that? Since Kevin Keegan's famous meltdown as Newcastle manager, as the Toonami surrendered the Premier League title. We'll choose the guys and their favourite managerial rants. But look, let's start off last night with I thought what was a Champions League classic. No wonder some of the big clubs want to kind of get more of these fixtures in the diary, but then without defeats, without the drama of last night, would it mean as much? Of course it wouldn't. PSG 1, Manchester City 2. Guys, I mean, I don't know what you think. Andy, perhaps let's start with you. Do you think that was Manchester City's single best performance in the Champions League, maybe only in the second 45 minutes, under Pep Guardiola, since Guardiola took charge?
Well, off the top of my head, it's hard to think of a better 45-minute performance, certainly not the entire game. It is hard to think of one that I'm sure there have been plenty of great performances away from home. Listen, City away from home are fantastic per se. So, yes, it was a great performance. I mean, it's strange, really. When you look back on it, I mean, it was a dominant second half from City. But when you look back on the whole game, in the end, they won courtesy of two what you would call soft goals. A cross that went straight in and a free kick that should never have got anywhere near. So in that sense, it was odd. But what you have to admire about them is that they didn't appear to panic when PSG, certainly through Neymar, were in control of that game. And I did like the way that Guardiola changed things in the second half. I think City were struggling to get the ball in the first half, and that's because they weren't playing. Their usual game is obviously to have the fullbacks push up, and Cancelo plays as an auxiliary midfielder normally. They didn't do that in the first half. They were a bit cautious, obviously wary of Mbappe and Di Maria and Neymar, and they didn't get enough ball. But then the second half, he was brave enough to push Cancelo further forward. Walker got further forward on several occasions, and that meant that they got more of the ball. They dominated midfield, whereas PSG had dominated it, and that meant that PSG couldn't get the ball to Neymar and Mbappe, who hence were pretty much nowhere to be seen in that second half. So I think it says more about. I think it was a big statement from Guardiola. He's, believe it or not, after all this time, I think probably 10 years since he won one. He's actually still learning with this City side in the Champions League. This City side is still, learning in the Champions League. All the players and as I say, they just showed incredible patience to actually, not fold. And to actually come back against the PSG side, who in flashes were absolutely brilliant last night. So from that sense, John, yes, it was pretty much, I hesitate to call it a landmark performance because, they might get turned over at the Etihad. But it was certainly, a mature performance, let's put it that way, when I think in the past they've been immature in the sense of Champions League contenders, and that was more a mature performance from them.
Yeah. Jezza, you were covering it last night as well. What did you know? What was your overall take on it? Because PSG was so good first half, weren't they? And I thought that game was absolutely terrific.
Well, my overriding...
There's so much about City in the second half, didn't it?
Yeah, look, it was... Any neutral watching that, it was some of the best football you'll ever see, really, from both teams. A fine advert for the Champions League and a reminder that actually the competition is just okay as it is. Thank you. I mean, I know the group stages are obviously a bit limited and a bit uninteresting at times, but when you get to the knockout stage, and especially the latter round, like the semis, you know, you've got the cream of the crop going toe to toe, and that's what happened last night. You know, Neymar was fantastic in the first half. So was Mbappe. You know, they really looked like they could run away with the game, and City were lucky actually to only be one down. But then it changed. The whole game changed, and you know, it was what we saw were two things really: how flaky PSG are still capable of being. You know, like they've been down the years. I know they got to the final last year and lost to Bayern Munich, but you know they have imploded in the past, and they did that last night. They finished with 10 men. Rowing with the referee. Neymar had vanished into the night, couldn't see him anywhere on the pitch. So that was a byproduct really of how strong City were in the second half, and it was a seminal moment really because you know in the past City would have folded last night, and they have done in certain games against opponents when the pressure's been on, but they didn't. They grew actually. They grew in strength and confidence, and they got better as the game went on, and they could have actually run away with another goal or maybe two. So. You know, I think it was a landmark result because they now have the belief that they can go on and win it, and they're in pole position to get to the final at least.
Matt, there's a method to the running order madness, and I wanted to come to you because I just, you know, I believe I'll check this with you that you're a fellow member of the Maurizio Pochettino fan club.
I have mentioned in the past my Irish side I do have for him.
Yes, well, I do too. And, you know, I mean, blimey, I was lucky enough to sort of see him and pay homage last week via Zoom. And he was in typically brilliant form. And do you think this? Sorry, Andy.
Yes, sorry.
To explain to the listeners, I think there's this perception amongst northern journalists that all London or southern journalists completely love Maurizio Pochettino and think basically he is the second coming.
Tuchel now, isn't it?
Listen, it's not a perception; it's a conviction. But I will.
It's a reality.
We'll let yourself and now Matt eulogise about the man who somehow has PSG in second place in the Farmers League. Away you go.
Well, the funny thing about this is Maurizio Pochettino, the one club where surely
he has to win something.
Surely has to win a trophy. Is this the season that PSG don't? No, I actually don't see it like that. Let's be positive, Matt. Matt, come on, can Lord Maurizio turn this around in that second leg? Is it the is the tie over, or is there still life in it for PSG?
Well, he's been down and out at the Etihad before in a Champions League match, hasn't he? And still come through and won it. Let's not forget that. Admittedly, Spurs did win the first leg that time and then went behind in the second. But no, I'm slightly concerned that, and I feel sorry for City in a way, that they didn't get another goal when they clearly deserved to in those later stages when PSG were all over the place. And you just hope that that's not going to come back and haunt them, because it is just a 2-0 win. You say just a 2-0 win. They're a great defensive side, City, and providing they stay on it, they'll be a great defensive side next week. I was really impressed, by the way, as well as Guardiola finally getting his tactics, keeping them normal rather than trying anything clever or whatever, but getting them right. The individual battle. One of my favourite moments from last night was when the ball was put down the flanks for Mbappe, and Kyle Walker clearly decided, right, this is my moment. I'm going to show him what quick is, and stepped up to the plate and won that individual battle. And that's what City were doing all of yesterday. They were winning those individual battles all over the park. And that collectively was just too much for PSG. And they're not used to that. And they clearly lost it mentally. they'll be a different side again. The weight of expectations off them. So those players that are world-class players can be world-class players again. So there is a danger. And with obviously the greatest manager ever at the helm, then, he might conjure something out of the bag. But no, it is a big ask. They've done a lot of the work. I know they won't make the mistake of thinking they've done all of it. But PSG have players that can hurt you. And if they score early, suddenly it becomes a very different tie altogether. And any team that has sort of Neymar and Mbappe and any of that players of that caliber, to think that you're through on a narrow away win will be ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say, I remember when Monaco played at Man City a few years ago, and then Mbappe played. Yes. And it was the closest thing I think I've seen to Thierry Henry since Thierry Henry retired. I mean, he's just like, what a player, what a talent. Yeah. It's just astonishing, isn't he? So I don't think it's over yet, Andy, is it? But
no.
No. The thing that worried me, Andy, was that basically I wonder whether City were just having a little dip. And it's hit them before, even when they've had outstanding seasons, they've had a little dip, and it's cost them in the Champions League. And last night perhaps was the antidote to that, and because of how well they played.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, a few things on that. I mean, yes. I mean, does Pochettino go down as the greatest manager never to win a trophy at the moment? Like Colin Montgomery is the greatest golfer never to win a major. It's like Posh is sort of like the greatest never to win a trophy. But anyway,
it's a matter of time, my friend.
It is. Well, I mean, listen. If he doesn't win, if he stays in the job and doesn't win the French league with PSG, then questions have to be asked, as they say. But just go in terms of the tie still alive, John. What you're saying, yes, and I agree about Mbappe, but I think Neymar is the key to all this. And I do think, I think it's worth talking about. We like over here. No getting away from it. We like to have a bit of a pile on Neymar, don't we? I mean, let's. I'm talking about us. I'm talking about pundits. I'm talking about social media. I mean, it is really, and there's never been probably a more. I mean, I keep hearing radio phone-ins about, is he the most overrated £200 million player ever? I'm like, no, he's just the only £200 million player. So there's not, there's actually nothing to compare with, So, and I do think that and even now, the switch from, understandably, because the switch from being from the first half to the second half now after the game, he's being held up as all that's flaky about PSG, and he's being held up himself as like typical Neymar, sort of feigning injury, getting his arms strapped when he just fell gently, sort of moaning at the referee, trying to get Kevin De Bruyne sent off, and all the negative stuff that let's face it, we particularly seem to enjoy in this country, putting on Neymar. But listen, just reflect on that 45 minutes, and he was absolutely world class. He is a world class player, and to me, he holds
the game lasts 90 minutes, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does last 90 minutes. Well, I mean, listen, City only played for 45 in essence. I was slightly fortunate to be only one down, and yes, it lasts 90 minutes, but you could not blame him for the second half. The fact of the matter is that City stopped the ball and stopped the service to Neymar and Mbappe. And he could hardly be blamed for that. But we like to blame him for that because, let's face it, he's an easy target. He's a target that we are so well practiced in having a pop at. But he, at one point, was the best player on that pitch. Yeah. And he has got the potential to be that again at the Etihad. And listen, no one will know that more than Pep Guardiola. Let's not forget that. And in fact, he said in the week how he thinks Barcelona would have won a lot more had they kept hold of Neymar. So I do think that he will be key to the second leg. And I do think that when you've got him in your team and Mbappe and, the delivery of Di Maria, obviously, that we saw, they are going to be dangerous, and they will probably, it'll be a fascinating game. But, any idea that this game is now done and dusted, this tie is done and dusted, is, of course, nonsense.
But don't we like to have a go at Neymar, specifically because he isn't Messi and he isn't Ronaldo, and what he hasn't done ever is do what he now needs to do, which is to take one of these major Champions League matches by the scruff of the neck and win it on his own. And that's effectively, it's no good him being the best player on the pitch.
But hasn't he done that?
He needs to be the best player in a Champions League semi-final and get them through it now. He's got to dig them out. That's why he's paid the big bucks. It's like you say, it's no good just being the best player on the pitch. He's got to be head and shoulders the best player on the pitch, be untouchable, be worth the money, and then the sort of the legend that is Neymar starts to be born more fully in a lot of people's eyes.
Do you think, Rossi, Neymar deserves to be in the same bracket as Messi and Ronaldo?
No. I remember I used to have this laugh with my I was about to say former colleague because I never see him anymore, Darren Lewis. But basically, that Neymar in the MSN era at Barcelona, Messi, Suarez, and Neymar. It was just. We used to laugh because basically the Neymar was almost felt like the odd man out, and there's no doubt about it. There was an element that Neymar left Barcelona because he didn't like to be overshadowed by Messi. I think that's fair, guys, isn't it? And then basically, I think he's sort of done well at PSG. And in certain games, he's really shone.
Yeah, but look,
I take Matt's point about grabbing the game by the scruff of the neck. But in fairness to him, I feel like he has done that.
The bottom line is
in the Champions League this season. But will he go down? Will he go down as one of the all-time greats?
Well, bottom line
isn't that the question? And I don't think he will.
They signed him to win them the Champions League.
Yes,
that's the bottom line. So next week that's the game they paid 200 million for him to win a game like that, and Matt's right. You know, he's earning fortunes. He's their marquee player. Look, he can't do everything on his own, but they will look. His bosses will look to him next week and say, right, this is why we signed you. Get us into the final, and then try and win it again.
Yeah. It's a bit like our old view, isn't it, in England of Ibrahimovic. Do you remember there was a time when Zlatan hadn't scored against English opposition? Years. Yeah, well, basically, he had this incredible record of never scoring against English opposition, didn't he? And then basically, all of a sudden we're all going, "Oh, I'm not sure about this guy." And then basically, all of a sudden, he goes to another level, and he's just astonishing. One of the all-time greats. And listen, I'm not, I think that Neymar is fantastic and basically has stepped up to the plate. But I do agree with Matt in that basically he's got to take that by the scruff of the neck and dominate a game, dominate and win a Champions League, and everyone go, that was Neymar's Champions League.
Yeah,
and the difference.
Matt's got a very good point. All the only thing you would say on that is that to look at him through the prism of Ronaldo and Messi, it's just harsh on anyone, isn't it? I don't think we're going to see a player like any of those two dominate games. Take games by the scruff of the neck like Messi and Ronaldo can do. I'm not sure that we'll see that from any player, going forward. It's not like, for example, a Kevin De Bruyne. We'll do something that in that manner that Messi and Ronaldo do. So I think, but I do think that we basically disregard PSG and Neymar at our peril, at City's peril.
Yeah, I agree. Just a final word, if I may, Jezza, on City. Mahrez, I thought he was brilliant on Sunday. And then in commentary last night, I don't know whether you heard it, but basically Jermaine Genius, I think, said that might just have been last night. He meant Mahrez's best game in a City shirt. Where is he form-wise at the moment? I mean,
look, he's
but there's no argument, is there?
He's playing really, really well, and he is now looking like the player who was so instrumental in helping Leicester win the league title. That's why City signed him for the games he's playing now. He's peaking just at the right time. And I know you mentioned Sterling, obviously Foden on the other side, who's sensational every week, it seems. So, it's a measure of how well those two are playing, and Mahrez in particular, that Sterling can't get a game.
No. Exactly. And it may be a debate for another show, but if you think now, you'd have to say that Raheem Sterling is behind Phil Foden, Riyad Mahrez, and Bernardo Silva.
Yeah, I mean, Silva was good last night too.
And I think Bernardo Silva has been excellent in recent games. I mean, excellent. So if you think, in that of that quartet, if you include Sterling, he's probably fourth. It's a debate probably to be had when the season's ended and probably after the Euros. But
Sterling's form is a real concern for Southgate.
Although I thought Sterling was good on Sunday.
Yeah, he was, but he just seems to be lacking that confidence, doesn't he, in front of goal? He's not scored many goals, and he just looks a bit short on confidence. And if it continues to the end of the season, then Southgate's got a huge call to make. Because obviously, he loves Sterling to bits and wants him in the team, but on current form, he doesn't justify starting for England in the first game of the Euros.
Nice player to have on the bench, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's not
that's City for you, isn't it? You know what I mean?
No, it's incredible. Matt, I want to come to you first on Chelsea, just because we both covered it, didn't we, the other night? And you'd have to say that it's looking quite promising, isn't it, for an all-English final? But I also just want to sort of touch on the job that Tuchel. We've said it lots of times before, but I think this brings it into a sharp focus. When you go to Real Madrid, play that well, you feel disappointed with a 1-1 because you played so well that you should have won the game. What a job he's done in the 3 months. How has he done it?
I think he's done it by giving his players absolute clarity of what's expected of them. I think for all that Frank Lampard's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Is he better than Poch?
He's not as sliced bread as Poch. No one's as sliced bread as Poch.
Meanwhile, down south.
But Frank was very encouraging and got his players so far. But I think Tuchel recognised the fact that they are actually, especially with the investment that they had in the summer, they've got better players than that. And I think he made it clear from the start. He took on board the fact that he was arriving to get them into the top four. He made no bones of that, even though they were nowhere near when he came in. And he also didn't mind taking on board the fact that, do you know what, if you can throw in a trophy or two, that's great as well, and kind of part of the expectation. He embraced all of that, made it clear to his players, no, they are high standards, but that's what we have here. And he made those players train and play to those standards, and made them believe that it was possible by breaking it down game by game, putting that run together, and basically building something that said, the confidence says, no, you should be winning these games. And Frank Lampard is saying, you can now win these games. And he was saying, you should win these games. It was a subtle difference. And I think the Frank Lampard stage needed to be got through because Chelsea, after losing Hazard, the transfer windows were on a bit of a low ebb. So they needed that stage. But then Tuchel accelerated the whole process and was brave enough to say, no, let's take these challenges on. And do that. If you can get Timo Werner to score goals, then he's a genius. Because at the moment, that's the one thing that seems impossible for anybody, even Pochettino.
What a miss that was, by the way.
It's just that they keep coming, don't they? And you feel sorry for strikers when you're in that.
I tell you what, as well, Chelsea were very good. We all watched the game, covered the game, but they were very, very good. But my one concern would be, will they live to regret not scoring more goals? Because they had Real Madrid on the ropes. They made Real Madrid look like an aging team, actually, on Tuesday.
They really did, yeah.
But Werner is such a frustrating player. I mean, I know you did a piece on him, saying it does bring a lot to the team. He's got speed. His link-up play is great. It's just the end product is just non-existent. Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, you've got Tammy Abraham on the bench. The different sorts of players, but I mean, if Tammy Abraham had the sort of form Werner's had in front of goal, he'd have been dropped from the team weeks ago. Werner he has got a lot of faith in him, hasn't he? Tuchel, it's a blind spot, really. But
well, I mean, I don't know. I think probably Tuchel just thinks like a few people, myself included, that I'm sure there is a big game in Timo Werner at some stage. I saw him I'm a fan. I mean, I'm unashamed fan of Timo Werner. I think it will come good for him. I think he's played in slightly different than he was playing Leipzig in that he has got pace, to frighten defenders, but they're not using him directly. There is that link-up play that you mentioned, Jez, which he does well with Pulisic and Mount, and I think that caused Real all sorts of problems. Even in the goal, he sort of drew a couple of defenders away from Pulisic, who then obviously took his goal very well. And I don't think he's being used as directly, and hence when the chances do come, he clearly is lacking a bit of conviction in them. But I saw him up at Anfield, and again, he missed a couple of chances. But you know what? he ran that back line of Liverpool's ragged. I mean, he really
did. That's not difficult, though, is it?
No, that's very true. And he set the tone, though, for Chelsea's performance. Yeah. He did set the tone for Chelsea's performance. And I think, you know, although Tuchel did reference, you know, and said, listen, let's not cry about it, the miss on Tuesday, he almost set the tone for that performance as well. You know, in that first, you know, they played him for an hour, almost as a player. You're going to get an hour out of him, non-stop. As I say, diddling well with Pulisic and Mount. And I agree, you know, you can't argue that he should be converting those chances. You know, the one he missed then, the one he missed at West Ham, even though he scored, he missed a sitter. And, of course, the one he missed against North Macedonia for Germany, which probably tops the lot. He is making an unfortunate habit of it. And Chelsea do have an unfortunate habit of recruiting strikers with a good goal record, who then don't translate that record when they get to Stamford Bridge. So, yes, it's an issue. But in terms of, you know, I think, I genuinely think that Tuchel, when it comes to Abraham Werner, it's not a choice, you know. If Werner's not in the side on Wednesday, then it won't be Tammy Abraham in the team. You know, it'll play another way. It'll play Havertz or whatever. I don't think that has become... He clearly doesn't, you know, rate Abraham particularly highly, and he clearly likes Werner. And I just think, you know, we'll keep on saying that. I might be saying it in 2 weeks' time, the end of the season, start of next season, but I do think that there's a very, very good Premier League striker in Timo Werner. I think we'll see it eventually.
Crossy, when when Tuchel came to Chelsea and he was negotiating his 18-month contract with Roman Abramovich, do you think winning the Champions League even came into the conversation? They could do it, couldn't they?
Absolutely. And the thing is about it is that he's got European pedigree, isn't he?
Yes.
Tuchel.
Oh.
You know, he's
pedigree against Real Madrid.
Absolutely. You know, he's basically, reached the final last year, had several campaigns with Borussia Dortmund. He is clearly, you know, instilling a confidence and a belief in those Chelsea players. He's been something special, isn't he? He really, really caught the imagination, and he's a top class manager. And basically, it doesn't even. The thing that I find amazing is that basically it feels like it's a transitional season, and I mean that because he took over at the end of January. He's inherited a squad. This is not his squad. He's yet to make any sort of mark or stamp any sort of authority on that group of players. Yeah. So just imagine how good they will be when he's maybe got a chance to sort of kind of tweak and do that. And listen, they've got a very good squad already. Please don't get me wrong. But I just think, wow, to do this with a group of players that he's inherited is just amazing.
They'll
really
be genuine
impressive.
title contenders next season, won't they?
Yeah,
not
and listen, a good chance they're going to win the FA Cup. But he knows the players as well, though, doesn't he? He does know quite a lot of the players anyway, either directly or indirectly. And you know, FA Cup final, probably going to finish top four, possible Champions League final against City. Mind you, City also Carabao Cup winners, Premier League winners elect, might even be this weekend, and Champions League finals. To tell you what, the Super League, what was that all about? I mean, Chelsea and Man City must be thinking, yeah, right, okay, yeah, forget that. I mean, a week is a long time, isn't it? Let's put it that way.
It certainly is. Yeah, absolutely. There you go. No, it'll be interesting. Let's hope for an all English final as in 2019. What a memory that was, guys! It's also been an incredibly. I hate talking about them, obviously, but basically, it's also been an incredibly turbulent week for Arsenal, hasn't it? I mean, you know, fan protests before the Everton game, the Bernd Leno howler, and then the man behind Spotify, Daniel Ek, stepping forward to make a very highly publicised bid with the backing of 3 club legends. Matt, where are Arsenal at the moment? Where do you see this? How do you see this one playing out?
Where Arsenal at the moment, they're 10th in the table, mid-table. Absolutely worse than they were when Unai Emery left. Who comes
2
back
places worse off, aren't they? Two places worse off.
But that's another 2 years down the drain of trying to not lose the Wenger legacy and all the rest of it. 2 more years of not having Champions League money. And Kroenke's going nowhere. He's made that clear. He even put out a statement just perhaps he wants to release a single so that the Spotify guy pays attention to it. I'm very, very
suspicious.
suspicious.
A podcast, of course.
You were, sorry?
Or record a podcast, of course.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Of course, yeah. I'm very suspicious of any takeover that you hear about more than about a day before it actually happens, because normally it's all about publicity for the bidder. You can see the mess that they've got into in Newcastle. That was as soon as that became public. If a lot of what Newcastle did happened behind closed doors, that wouldn't be the saga that it is, and might have progressed, a lot faster. But any takeover that you hear about from back in the day, Leeds United 20 years ago, when they were going to be bought out by the fake sheikh, the more it's all publicity, and you just wonder. He's got half the money that Kroenke's got. And that's only paper money because it's based on the valuation of his company, which he still owns. He's got about a 10th or a 20th of the amount of money that Usmanov's got, who's tried for years to get into Arsenal. He's got a few legends who possibly should know better than put pressure on a regime that's not going to change. Yes, Arsenal fans are frustrated, but Kroenke's going nowhere. And if they want things to get better, it's going to have to be within that establishment. I wonder now still what I think Arteta's got to start delivering in the next, if he's given that long, the next 12 months. You need to see some realistic and measurable signs that things are getting better there, because at the moment they are drifting into mid-table obscurity, clinging on to the fact, gratefully hanging on to invitations to be part of the Big Six and a European Super League, because there's no way that they're there on merit at the moment. And and the only good thing for the club and the healthy thing for the club is that enough fans still care about them to make the sort of protests that we've seen this week, because so often when Wenger was drifting into the sunset, it was all a bit half-hearted. And when you expected these previous protests, the empty seats at the Emirates that were bought and paid for, all that sort of thing, you just wonder whether enough people still care about Arsenal. And it's become clear this week that actually, yes, people do still care about their club. And that's got to be channeled in a positive way to building a club that is worthy of a top six, a Big Six labelling, but really needs to find that form on the pitch to justify it, because at the moment they're miles off. But hopefully Arteta's the man to lead them there, because more changes are going to help them, unless they do a Tuchel and pull the absolute masterstroke of appointing someone who can achieve instant results. But generally, the whole place is a mess, and Kroenke's going nowhere. So it's going to have to be achieved within the institution as it stands. And they've got a long, long way to go.
Andy, break it down for me, because I think listeners will immediately say, or viewers will immediately say, hang on a minute, you're a group of journalists. Why wouldn't you want that takeover bid to be public? Why is it a bad thing to be paid out in public? I've got my views on this, but go on. It's most unusual, isn't it? And basically, I saw loads of different journalists saying this is ridiculous, seeing it played out in public. And I'm thinking, if I'm on Twitter, I'm thinking, what on earth? A load of journalists complaining about a story coming out, but there is a flip side to it.
Yeah, you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't say that. It's like we complain about when managers have a go at referees. That's out of order. But if they didn't have a go at them, it'd be fairly dull on the back pages, wouldn't it? It's
But Matt's right. It's that type of thing. I'm saying. But Matt is right.
I think in this particular instance, this tweet sort of looked like a knee-jerk tweet to the Super League sort of fiasco, really. And it looked almost whimsical, didn't it? Let's put it that way. His first tweet almost looked whimsical, as if you're just going to buy. And secondly, I guess the reason why journalists, many journalists write that, the most serious takeovers are never played out in public. We are referencing, back to Roman Abramovich. Basically, that's the touchstone for all of us. Is that no one particularly knew until he basically handed over the cash to Ken Bates at that particular time. There was no real hint of that. Now that could be the fact that journalists weren't actually will be disappointed they didn't know about that. and it was just kept very well hidden from them. So the idea, that it goes back to that idea that if you're serious, you don't want it out there because you don't want anyone to put, barriers in its way, etc. So, so for example, the proposed Saudi takeover of Newcastle, quite well publicised. Now, would that have had the scrutiny and the barriers put in its way had it just sort of gone through? Well, I mean, that's a difficult one because, there are certain things they would have needed to do, and certain, and inevitably the government would have had to get involved, no doubt. However, it would have had more of a chance if it had been sort of particularly surreptitious. So I guess that's why we're skeptical about it. And why wouldn't you be skeptical about something that just looked like a whimsical comment on Twitter, even though he has since, suggested, yes, he'd love to. But then again, the reason why, and Matt articulated this, why you're skeptical is that it's not for sale. There's even a slightest hint. I mean, Stan Kroenke, as Matt said, has resisted the, Alisher Usmanov, forever, basically. And you probably couldn't have found a more determined suitor than that, and he couldn't succeed, So what gives this guy the chance? The fact is they're both, all Kroenke, Henry at Liverpool, the Glazers at United. I mean, they're holding on because the bottom line is they think that these investments are going to come up with more and more returns, whether it be in a Super League or in the Premier League or the Champions League. They think these clubs are still going to be very, very lucrative investments, and there's no sign of that stopping. They are going to be.
No, of course not.
So why should they sell?
Oh no, I must relay a couple of silly little anecdotes on this one. I always remember the Chelsea takeover when Roman Abramovich, and please don't get me wrong here, there's no way that I'm claiming to have broken this story. A couple of papers certainly had the absolute march on this, but I always remember taking a call off a Russian pal of mine, a contact, in the afternoon, saying, have you heard about this, story that's sort of kind of unfolding here in Moscow, and basically told me about this guy Abramovich and had to look him up and stuff. Ring the office and sort of, the office saying, well, I'm not sure about that. Ring them back again about half an hour later and said, I better not say who it was. It says, as I spoke to the desk man, it basically says, it says he'll do a separate on it. Basically, it'll give it its own headline on the page lead and sort of down inside. Basically, give us 8 pars.
8 pars,
does that desk man still work?
Is it? It's not bad. I have to say, thankfully, it did blow up a little bit more that later that day, and it became, oh my god, what a story! I mean, what a huge story. And
so you are claiming to have got it then?
Hey.
So you are claiming to have got
no, because I have to say another paper had it absolutely nailed down, and in fairness to them. And
does that desk man still work for real?
I know my place. Oh yeah. Okay. I remind them every Christmas party. Don't worry, every single year. Do you remember the time the Roman Abramovich takeover? Oh no. Anyway, but you guys know me that well enough. And the other one about not selling was that basically I always remember. In sort of the December of 2008, ringing Arshavin's agent, a real character called Dennis Lacter, and he gave me one of the all-time great quotes that I rarely quote agents. I have to say, I use it for information, but it was so funny that I said, "Do you mind if I go?" He said, "No, go ahead." But basically, I said, Arsenal want Arshavin. He said, I know they want Arshavin, but I like the look of Angelina Jolie. I'm not. Unfortunately,
but I'm no Brad Pitt.
Arsene Wenger likes the look of Arshavin. He can't have him, and so it's Anyway, it was one of those things, but it was just bizarre, isn't it? And it feels like that, doesn't it? And it's just. But the thing that gets me, Jeremy, is that he's got the backing of these 3 guys, and one of them is Thierry Henry, who's so brilliant, who's so professional, so focused, who's the ultimate pro, driven. And if it were Thierry Henry as manager and Mikel Arteta was leading a takeover group, Thierry Henry would be going nuts about sort of a group of former players at the most important stage of the season, potentially, derailing the campaign.
It's a bit hypocritical, isn't it? Yeah. But the timing of this story is quite transparent, really. Because I don't know if you agree, but I mean, clearly this guy has been working in the shadows, trying to get these ex-players involved for some kudos to lend some kudos to attempted buyout of Kroenke. But probably the fact that it's come out a few days after the collapse of the Super League, where Kroenke's been getting pelters for his ownership of the club, along with the other American owners in the Premier League. He may have thought naively, granted, but that Kroenke would actually think about walking away from Arsenal, given the fact that the Super League's collapsed and, he's despised by a section of Arsenal supporters. So, he maybe thought that the situation was vulnerable there, but clearly Stan's going nowhere. And I don't know who said it earlier on the podcast, but it might as well be us four trying to buy Arsenal, because it's not going to happen. No. It's ridiculous. And why he's still banging this drum, Mr. Eck, I don't know, because listen, if Kroenke says I'm not selling, he's not selling. It's just a dead in the water now.
Mind you, Spotify.
I keep reading that he's worth $3 billion, and his company is worth $3 billion, and he's got shares in that company, but he's not worth that.
How much money would it cost? How much money would it cost to make Arsenal a team capable of challenging for the title again? Because they're so far off the likes of City and Chelsea now, and
you could argue, couldn't you? They're basically 1.8 billion. If that's probably going to be rejected. Why on earth would? I mean, you're not going to sell, so you'd have to blow them away with the price, and then you'd have to add on another billion to rebuild the squad. Frankly, I mean, you would. They are a long way behind.
Which makes you wonder why the heck would he want to pump all his money into a football club? Yeah, he must be crazy.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bottomless pit, isn't it?
Yeah. But to be fair, Jeremy, he's probably looked at all the other owners and thought, well, actually, I probably won't need to put my money into it. They just borrow it against the club, don't they? I mean, that's the bottom line. He won't.
It'll go down well.
He'll be worth X amount, but then he'll borrow it against that, won't he? Borrow it against the club. That's the way. It's financial matters that go a bit above my head, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, from my perspective, I'm very, very, I'm very sceptical about it, simply because I'm not convinced about the whys and wherefores of it. But that doesn't mean to say that I can't see where the fans are coming from.
Yeah.
Because, absolutely, they're right to be incredibly critical and very upset with the current ownership, and the current ownership would accept that. And then you've got to rebuild that trust after the Super League farce. And you've got to rebuild that. But I just think that if there's a positive to come out of that, then it has to be for a greater either fan representation or greater dialogue with fans moving forward, surely. And that's not just with Arsenal. I think, across the clubs, surely now, I think in the review of teams, hopefully, that could be a way forward. Matt, do you think that's realistic?
Well, it's whatever Kroenke wants, isn't it? That's
not just Arsenal, though. I think that basically across the board, perhaps even broader.
You hope so. Well, we've got this government-led review into fan-led review into the governance of football, so we'll see how that comes out. But to be fair, politicians don't seem to be doing particularly well at running anything at the minute, so hopes aren't high. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we as fans, we want fans to be more involved because we understand what the game's about, and I think, to be fair to the owners, they understand. They just don't necessarily care enough. Because they see the pound notes. A German model is held up as the example, but then you look at the Bundesliga and it's not a great competitive league. We jumped into bed 20 odd years ago, 30 odd years ago with the big money, and that's, we've got a great Premier League. I think competitively we all like watching it. But that's the price we paid for it, is that we've lost a little bit of control over it. I think there's enough control for them to finally see sense, and fans have shown that we can, flex our muscles and make call clubs into question. But yeah, perhaps the outcome of this European Super League misstep will be that they'll pay lip service at least to show more interest in what the fans think, but whether actually it means any real power is perhaps a long way down the line.
That's quite a cynical view, and one I totally share. The bottom line is that winning things and successful teams, make people forget an awful lot of stuff, as I've just alluded to before. Chelsea fans and Man City fans won't be talking about the Super League if one of the clubs wins the Champions League, having already won other trophies. That's already forgotten virtually. And I'm not saying Arsenal fans will forget about that if they win the Europa League. But, let's face it, if they were to win the Europa League, then you're looking at Arteta, albeit his record over how many games has he been in charge? 50 or 60?
77.
77 across all competitions.
One less than Emery got.
Yeah, but one less. But then at the end, after 80 games, after low 80 games, he might have 2 trophies in the cabinet. Which FA Cup and Europa League. Now I know managers have still been dismissed on less, but what I mean is that won't appease the fans to a full extent, but it goes some way to doing it. Yes, I agree with Matt. I think in an ideal world, yes, fan representation and fan power to a certain extent. But I suspect the route you go down is it will be lip service, fans on committees, boards, or whatever, but with actual no executive power. These guys who own clubs aren't giving executive power to fans. No matter how mortified they may feel about what happened to the Super League.
Just imagine if we'd have been living in normal times, obviously the games that have taken place since Super League, just imagine being a director sat in a director's box at a stadium, the amount of grief they would have got. I mean, obviously by the time fans get back to stadiums, which will hopefully be at the start of next season, there's a lot of water will have gone under the bridge by then. So it'll be interesting to see what reception chief executives, directors, chairmen get when they take the seat for a game.
But that's my point. Is I think it will be different. I mean, do you think at the Etihad they will turn on directors at the Etihad? Do you genuinely think that? I just can't see it.
Can I just say?
I cannot see it. I think they'll do it at United? Absolutely.
Here comes your breakfast, Crossy.
Here comes my coffee. Thank you.
Do I think they'll do it at Liverpool? Yes.
I'll tell you what. Here's a funny one. Here's a funny one for you. So basically, before the Carabao Cup final, at least me and Matt took this very seriously. Thanks for your contribution, boys. Noted. We were asked to do a Vox Pop.
Yes.
And
I was running late.
I was running late.
Guys,
we're coming down from north. Me and Jesse.
I'm joking. At least one of us out. Me and Matt anyway took surnames. But anyway, I digress. But no, we were asked to do a Vox Pop beforehand. And I collared a very, shall we say, well-spoken, long-standing Man City fan. Mm-hmm. So he clearly, reads one hell of a lot about sort of all the fallout, studies every single word, obsessed by his club. Okay. And I basically, we had this sort of range of questions, didn't we? About kind of, about sort of kind of how long you supported the team, what do you make of this week? Will the Super League affect it? And he said to me, well, I'm so pleased that Man City didn't sign up for it. So I said, well, obviously Man City did. And he goes, no, we didn't. No. So I said, well, forgive me, but you were one of the 6 English teams to sign up as one of the 12 founding members. Well, I suppose so. But we were the first to pull out and we were never going to do it. So I said, well, you were. It's just like and I'm not saying that to knock City, but it's the City fans have a completely different view of their team and their team's participation and signing up for it. As in fairness, I think to Chelsea.
Yes.
I think that Spurs fans are angry, but they're angry about the ownership of the club rather than the direction of the club rather than the Super League. The 3 English teams that are owned by American owners have a completely different view, and it's a fascinating take. And I just thought that guy, he just reminded me of about perceptions of about how it's viewed.
Crossy, I mean, now if you want to read more expanded views along those same lines, pick up your Daily Mirror tomorrow for my column. I totally and utterly agree. To the extent, as I said, I won't give too much away. Totally to the extent where I'm beginning to think conspiracy theories. I'm beginning to think Chelsea and Man City may just. I mean, well, let's put it this way: they played it very
well done. Him. I will offer you Spurs.
I think Spurs to a certain extent.
Oh, they're irrelevant, are they? God,
no, I didn't say irrelevant, but to a certain extent, I think let's just leave them out of it for a second. But I totally agree with you. Now, this may have happened by accident, but without a doubt, though, I mean, Chelsea and Man City, you wouldn't say they're coming out of it smelling of roses, but they're not in the same stuff as Liverpool, Arsenal and Manchester United are. And almost, you know, as I say, but I am going to do a column on it tomorrow about, you know, I mean, could this, I mean, it's a grand conspiracy theory, but maybe Chelsea and Man City knew what they were doing all along. I mean, let's face it.
Sorry, it's interesting you say that, Andy, because Thomas Tuchel was asked by a journalist in this preview ahead of the Real Madrid game whether he felt that English fans might turn, you know, often we get behind the English teams, but if English fans had turned against Chelsea because they were ready to jump ship, and he just like sniggered and said, "What against Real Madrid?" And they've allowed themselves to become a little bit tarnished. We're a little bit bad. Hey, but we're no Real Madrid. We're no Liverpool. We're no Manchester
We're no
United.
Liverpool. We're not America owned. We're owned by a sort of kindly benefactor. And it does. And the more I think about it, I'm thinking, you know what? How? Let's face it, guys. We were all. The narrative was that Man City and Chelsea were reluctant to join the Super League. Okay, and then pretty swiftly, once they had, the narrative was Man City and Chelsea would lead the exit from the Super League, which they did. So we're you know, that's the perception. So in other words, you know, those two that has always been there, and the overriding narrative has been it's all the fault of the Americans, basically, of Kroenke, of
those dastardly American owners,
you know, and Chelsea, Man City. What are the chances of Mansour Abramovich being, you know, targeted by fans? Absolutely none at all. You know, these are benefactors, this club, who've given them times they could not imagine. But Liverpool fans will turn against John W. Henry to the extent where he had to make this grovelling apology. United fans will turn against United owners and by proxy Ed Woodward, who's had to resign. And now Kroenke is under enormous pressure from the fans as well. So all this discord and disquiet is at those three clubs. Meanwhile, Chelsea and City plough on, go and collect trophies, go and contest Champions League finals, take the money off the good old Sheikh Mansour and Roman. And what's going to happen? And plus, on top of that, you've got the situation where, don't forget, what is the... they have to consider then, well, what are the punishments going to be? Now, if the punishments, as we all have done these off-the-record stuff recently, I think we pretty much know that it's not going to be points deduction. No. It's not going to be any ban from European competition because the authorities do not want to punish the fans who've been so great in all this. So what could it possibly be? It's probably going to be a financial penalty. And that's really going to hurt Sheikh Mansour and Roman Abramovich, isn't it? I mean, it really is. You know, I mean, it will just help them get rid of some money. So, and just the whole thing, just as I say, if it's not a conspiracy theory that's right, and probably unlikely it is, one thing is for sure is that Chelsea, Man City, not only because of their situation this season and the competitions they're threatening to win, Chelsea, Man City are emerging from this Super League fiasco in a far better way than Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal, and yes, Spurs as well.
In summing up, Dunny, they've both played a blinder.
Well, basically, yes. I mean, they played a blinder.
Our friend Alan Chamberlain.
But here's another one. Just quickly to go on that as well, because I think it's a fascinating discussion. But also, then you may ask, well, wouldn't they have been better? Wouldn't they have played a bigger blinder? Why did they sign up in the first place?
Well, this is it.
So why did they sign up in the first place? So let me just say,
go on.
Now, if you really were taking this conspiracy theory to the limit, you would say they signed up because, right, without them, it doesn't happen. It doesn't even start. Liverpool, Man United, and Arsenal and Spurs do not break away without City and Chelsea, right? So it doesn't happen. None of this happens. The status quo remains. So they've taken them in by joining it, then basically cut them adrift, and then I don't know. It's got too much time on my hands thinking about this. Sort of
stuff. I can see why you do. And our regular contributor, Alan Chamberlain, I've been looking at everyone's messages, so I appreciate those. Lots on Arsenal, even a couple on Mahrez and the ownership and stuff. But Alan makes this point in that the only reason Man City and Chelsea weren't pushing for the Super League is because they were still in this season's Champions League and didn't want to be kicked out, which is alternative.
Fair point.
And that is a
very fair point.
City have obviously had their problems well documented with UEFA down the years with FFP and stuff. Yeah. So they treaded on thin ice with UEFA. So they were probably paranoid about.
Yeah. I just want to come back one last point, going back to Arsenal, Jeremy, because I am fascinated about perceptions and journalist perceptions, particularly in the whole north-south divide. So Friday night, right? I'm watching Arsenal-Everton. Arsenal, I thought were terrible. It was an awful, and basically, it just couldn't put them to bed, could they? Basically, and then they lose to a terrible goal. I mean, the hopes of any lingering hopes of reaching Europe dead. Now it's all on the Europa League, and I'm thinking, blimey, Arteta, where's it going with this? And out the blue, a pal of mine in football, I should add, saying, how comes that Arteta gets such an easy ride? That basically, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer last season, fighting to save his job. Now look at them. Frank Lampard got him in the Champions League, and yet you lot, what about Arteta? How comes no criticism? And I have to say, bearing in mind they sacked Emery, in similar circumstances.
Who's going to knock him out of the semi-finals of the Europa League?
Yeah, and it's just like
for the final punch in the gut.
He's Arteta. I mean, I was so passionate about Arteta, and even I'm beginning to wonder. He's got to make some progress. He's got to improve things. I mean, they spent money badly, but basically, where is the club going?
Well, the fact that he gets an easy ride is probably indicative of where Arsenal are, isn't it? It's damning that, you mentioned Solskjaer. Well, Solskjaer manages Man United, where success is basically, part of the DNA. Anything less than that is a failure. You've got to win stuff, and he's not done yet. I'm sure he will at some point. But Arsenal are different because they are used to being in a vacuum of mediocrity now. So, I know he won the FA Cup, Arteta, but winning a trophy is just deemed to be some sort of bonus thrown into the equation, really. That's what it feels like from a neutral's point of view to me. I don't know if the lads agree, but yeah, you're right. And he got that job. I thought it was a mistake, personally. I thought the job was too big for him in his first job. I mean, okay, he shadowed Guardiola for several years, but does that make him a great manager? If I shadowed Guardiola, it wouldn't turn me into a great manager, would it? But I think there was a bit of mystique about that. He's Guardiola's big buddy. He played for Arsenal. Was a great servant to Arsenal and a wonderful footballer, but doesn't guarantee a thing when it comes to management. And the job is such a huge one at Arsenal because they're so far behind the rest that it probably needed someone with more experience and know-how, probably. But, having gone down the route of Arteta, I hope they stick with him just to see if he can sort of claw back some respectability and turn them into, a team that is capable of at least going deep in competitions, because at the minute, they're just going backwards, really.
They're miles off it, aren't they, really? I just want to take a very quick look at, because I'm conscious of time, but Man United, Liverpool. I mean, it's incredible to think that, by the way, social media blackout this weekend, and credit to the clubs and the leagues and
so on.
It could be such a seismic. Well, I'm sure, yeah. It could be such a seismic. I'm not a player, though, Jeremy. I hasten to add. I've been slightly watching this with interest. Basically, suddenly people thinking they're sort of kind of players and what have you. But I absolutely believe in the boycott, because you have to put pressure on the social media companies. It's just incredible that it's still not getting verification. It's absolutely ridiculous, and I don't know whether the media still should basically stand up and be campaigning during that boycott to get that verification. But anyway, it's a dilemma that I'm sure we'll counter, but it's just unforgivable. So if that puts the pressure on, then great. But let's go back to the United Liverpool preview, because it could be that basically City wrap up the title if results go. So we've got that playing out in the background, but Liverpool at the moment just can't finish teams, can they? I mean, United almost second wrapped up. I mean, it's not quite what it used to be, guys, but we are getting on to the end of the season, and basically it's it could be really interesting, isn't it? The way that it plays out. Matt, how do you see the game going on Sunday?
I think it'll be an afternoon where both teams lose, because it'll be the afternoon that City win. City will be crowned champions. I think United will do enough against Liverpool Liverpool will do enough to get a draw, I think, against United.
Because they just need to drop points, don't they?
Yeah, I think that puts them over the line. So nobody wins at all at Old Trafford. Meanwhile, the other half of the city, they're all celebrating because what we've known for a long time is finally going to be confirmed. But I have to say, I can't remember the build-up to a United-Liverpool game being so low-key, with so many other things like the Champions League going on and titles being awarded elsewhere and FA Cup finals coming up. I think it's a massive wake-up call for where they both are. United, if they could win, then it's a big step and makes a statement that they are now the big challengers to City next season. If I think Liverpool need to do something just to stop the rot, because if they go to United, lose, where does that leave them? I mean, the second half of the season they're on the floor, and for them to think that they can build a title challenge again next season, from there, you need a few green shoots, surely, to say, well, look back to that game, we can still do it. But at the moment, they're at rock bottom, and unless they can do something at Old Trafford, I don't know quite how much belief is left at the bottom of the sink to sort of build on next season.
I mean, Cross, it's weird because normally this would be the fixture of the season for years and years. It's always been the biggest game of the season. It just feels like an afterthought now. But having said that, if United can beat Liverpool and hammer another nail in Liverpool's coffin, they'll love that.
They will absolutely love it.
Yeah, I think it does feel like a bit of an afterthought, but I think Liverpool have got all the motivation they need to get a result there, and to keep those top four hopes alive, and obviously to beat United Old Trafford, which obviously they would enjoy doing. I do think with Liverpool, I was at the game in Anfield last Saturday for the Newcastle game. They played well in parts of that, but they missed chances. Similar personnel, but don't forget they are missing. A couple of key players, and they have been for some time. Certainly, obviously Van Dijk for most of the season, and Jordan Henderson for the past 2 or 3 months. And he, I think, is the player that they've really missed in the second half of the season.
He binds them all together, doesn't he?
He binds them all together, and if nothing else, the fact that again against Newcastle, and I know he had a little spell where Klopp played Phillips anchor back as centre halves, and Fabinho was restored to midfield, and that made a difference. But Fabinho has again been playing centre back, and it just leaves it gives the midfield just a bit more of a weakness, a bit of a softness about it. And then, of course, if one or two of the front three aren't particularly firing, and Sadio Mane at the moment is really struggling, to find his scoring form, things can go wrong fairly quickly. But I see where Matt's coming from in the sense that it's hard, for them to imagine them bouncing back next season. However, I think again, don't forget, the efforts of the last 2 and 3 seasons must have taken an awful lot out of them. And I think they'll be glad to see the season end and to regroup and maybe sign a couple of players and kick off again towards the end of August. But as it happens, I just think, again, I think they have got a performance in them. I think it'll lift them going to Old Trafford. And I think they might sneak the win that City will need, assuming, of course, that City beat Palace on Saturday.
Never assuming any result against Roy
at any level. Never assume at any level.
Never assume anything, because I'm, speaking of fan clubs, I think Roy does a super job at Crystal Palace. I don't know whether he's saying goodbye at the end of the season, but there you go.
And tell me who we say hello to.
Exactly. I tell you, whoever we will say hello to immediately inherits a job thinking, blimey, fourth and bottom will do, and Roy Hodgson always delivers that and then some. So anyway, rant over about Crystal Palace. I'm going to finish. It's 25 years since Kevin Keegan's infamous, I will love it, I will absolutely love it, rant about the title race and Newcastle's meltdown, Fergie's war of words. So come on, guys, I'm going to go around the room. Who wants to go first? I'm sure you don't want to follow.
I want to go before
basically.
No, I'm trying to think
about your favourite, your best ever managerial rant, and hopefully it might even be with you in the room. So come on.
Well, mine is the one thing. I know this is Fergie, which is not exactly original, but we were in America. It was 2011. We're in Washington on a pre-season tour. And a good friend of ours, who's sadly no longer with the Bob Cass, had written this story about. He spoke to Fergie because he was pally with Fergie. He had his number, you know. He would speak to him, and it's when United were trying to sign Wesley Sneijder, and he spoke to Fergie, and basically Fergie made it clear that Sneijder was being a greedy son of a bitch, and wanted huge money. And Cassie went away, filed this story to his online desk. And they took the words into a direct quote and quoted Fergie in the story. And anyway, some mischievous journalist had spotted it before I went into the press conference after the game, put it on Fergie, and he went ballistic and just said, "Who wrote the story?" Somebody said, "Bob Cass." So he stormed out of the room. Meanwhile, unbeknown to Cassie, he stood next to me and David McDonald, a colleague of ours, in the tunnel at the Washington Redskins Stadium, waiting for the players to come out. Fergie came around the corner like Lewis Hamilton in search of Bob, picked him out, charged towards him with a face that can only be described as puce. It was about 100 degrees in this stadium. It was absolutely boiling. And I was stood next to Cassie, and he just tore into Cassie with a horrific rant of expletives and just basically said, our friendship is finished after that stuff you wrote. And there was spittle coming out of Fergie's mouth, and it was landing on my shoulder and stuff. It was like proper hairdryer, which is ironic because Bob didn't have much hair. But and Cassie, Fergie said to him, "Delete my number from your phone because you will never need it again," and then stormed off. And poor Cassie was stood outside the stadium trying to get a taxi to take us back to the hotel. Seriously, he had sweat coming down. He's like a cartoon character. And sweat literally pouring down his face, and it looked like he'd been hit by a bus, and it ruined his trip. Yeah. It took a long time, actually.
Well, I was going to say, did he kiss and make up?
They did eventually, thankfully, before he died. But for a few years, Fergie wrote him off. He didn't speak to him, and it was brutal. It was an absolute brutal takedown. That.
And there was, I think I wasn't there for that, but I think there was footage, wasn't there? I think. Or I don't know, it was just sent to us footage, but I remember seeing footage of it.
There was a lot of cameras, foreign cameras, American cameras down there in that tunnel, and I'm sure it was captured on film. Yeah. It was scary.
I'll save you from following Andy.
So no one has to do that, surely. Jess, were you there for the Battle of Valley Parade? He wasn't a manager; he was a chairman.
Jeffrey Richmond.
Were you there that day?
On the pitch with us? Yeah, I was.
Yeah, you must have been behind me because it was Ian Edwards and myself at the front. Simon Mullock was in there, and Jez was there.
Yeah, about half a dozen
in the centre circle at Valley Parade after Bradford City, having just stayed up on the final day of the season, had decided that to move on to the next level, they'd signed Benito Carbone for vast wages.
40 grand a week.
40 grand a week when the previous cap had been at 10 grand. And Jeffrey Richmond, for his unveiling, the chairman, had decided to invite Bradford City fans to come along to the press conference and stand in the background, opened up the bar, and then sat us in front. And we were trying to go about our business as
lambs to the slaughter,
asking questions like, "What on earth have you just done? Aren't you worried about destroying team morale by signing this player out of kilter? Blah blah blah." All a little bit negative, not quite what Jeffrey imagined when he pulled off what he thought of as a coup. And then it came out for photos afterwards, and we were all invited out to the Valley Parade pitch for photos. And then after that, then still seething from the way the press conference had gone, Jeffrey Richmond marched towards 6 of us just hanging around with about 50 fans behind him and came across. I was in the vanguard. Jeremy was around there again, like I say, and he was sticking his fingers into our chests saying, "You begrudge us. You hate the fact that we're going to do something now. You hate the fact that Bradford City stayed up last season. We're trying to move things on, and you're trying to belittle us." And all, to be fair, Ian Edwards, who was working for the Mirror at the time in that area, just said, "Let's see where we are in 4 years' time, Jeffrey. 4 years, well, see where we are in 2 years' time."
Bankrupt.
And the truth was on the backside of 2 administrations and in League Two. And he subsequently apologised and admitted it was part of his 6 weeks of madness. But it was the presence of the fans behind. I think they should make all press conferences fan events after lockdown, because
Especially they threatened to fight all 6 of us in one go.
Oh,
but he was ready for us. The sleeves rolled up, ready for it. But that was probably the most dramatic. Probably the most nervous was when Mick Harford, legendary hard man from the 80s, once rang me up to tell me that he knew where I lived. But that was a more quietly spoken one rather than a proper rant. But still just as effective.
Andy.
Well, you mentioned about that number about what Jeremy mentioned here about don't use the number again. Of course, one manager, that was his speciality, ringing up journalists saying, "Oh, I'm just seeing how you are, just to check you've got my number." Yes, I've got your number. But we'll never ever use it to say. But listen, we can't. I mean, rants that I was there for. I mean, I think there's been quite a few. But listen, to anyone listening who hasn't heard the Graham Taylor rant to Rob Shepherd, I mean, in the press conference. I mean, it just beats them all, doesn't it? I mean, it absolutely beats them all. Put a smile on your face, Rob. Blah blah blah. And I just think that will go down as, unbeatable. I mean, it's an impossible job to actually beat that rant from Graham Taylor. And of course, it was, I wouldn't say unlike him, D. Graham, but it was typical of what our managers react under pressure, isn't it? Under pressure, you'll just never. I mean, the Joe Kinnear must be up there as well.
That is a belter.
That must be right up there. So, but I haven't really got any more sort of in-depth ones other than that. I mean, just so many from Fergie, obviously. So many from Fergie. I remember, Fergie used to, I can't remember what it was he was ranting at a couple of us at, but obviously it's this time of year when we all pick our football of the year. And ever since then, every rant included him saying, what the, beeping, do you know? You lot beeping pick David beeping Ginola as beeping footballer of the beeping year. And then he would have this great pause, his theatrical pause, and then go, for one good beeping game against beeping Barnsley. Of course, he did have a good game against Barnsley that season. And Fergie's the best. He could rant on paper. I mean, he could rant in writing, Fergie. I remember doing a piece about the Battle of Stamford Bridge after the game, and Fergie wrote to ban me, and he loved writing. He was obviously dictating a letter to his secretary. And it starts off, dear Andrew, blah, blah, blah. And it would just descend from, sort of formal politeness to start with just into abuse. And I sent him one back saying, listen, if you're upset by my opinions, that's what I'm paid to do. I'm sure you wouldn't retract yours if they were honestly held. I regret if it's caused you any, offence, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Being banned by Fergie was a badge of honour, though, wasn't it? It was like you were doing your job properly.
He wrote back basically just saying, dear Andrew, call that an apology, yours and Alex. Well, he wasn't there then at the time. and his rants, which is obviously, you're all idiots. And obviously another catchphrase was away and write your rubbish. Only more succinct. And so listen, there's so many, but I would advise anyone who's not seeing the Graham Taylor rant.
It's on YouTube, I think.
It's on YouTube, and to watch it again, and also, we can reminisce about some great old friends. Some of whom are sadly no longer with us. There in that press conference, I would have loved to have been there for that. I tell you, I would have loved it if I was there for that.
We don't get rants on Zoom, do we? We don't get rants.
We don't really get rants on Zoom, do we? No.
Like
and I think also the manager,
muted.
You know, Jose apart. I mean, Klopp's got rant potential in him, hasn't he? Really?
Well, he went on a rant, didn't he, after Leeds?
He went on a rant
on the kind of on the
he did.
newspaper Zoom.
Yes,
you know,
he
real
did.
rant, didn't he?
He ranted on that, and then
which was a shame. It's almost a shame that it doesn't go out broadcast, that one, because that's you know, that would have been an infamous one.
Yeah,
and I don't mind that, to be fair. If he's got a point to say, I'd rather managers say it. Honestly, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Say it. Don't boggle it up.
Yeah, and obviously Jose had a good ranting, didn't he? I mean, the one at United, Jesse, were you there for that? For treated with some respect?
Yeah,
that's not a bad one, that.
Yeah,
I've won 19, whatever, more than the rest of them put together.
But I suppose we all compare all these rants to Fergie.
Benitez fact rant was a good rant.
Yeah, that was. One, actually, yeah. We all compare these rants to Fergie, and Fergie was a master.
We do, he was. Yeah.
I like this. I like the Steve McLaren one after the Steve McLaren one when England played Andorra, and then basically we'd given him some stick, and basically England, I think, had drawn in Israel, wouldn't they? And then basically really struggled to beat Andorra a few days later. You know, it just wasn't working for Steve.
We were 0-0 at half time, weren't we?
0-0 at half time. I think basically he called Israel one of the best teams in Europe. One of the best. It was England's performance was one of the best in Europe that weekend, and then basically being absolutely pilloried. And I have to say, I was a bit of a front row Johnny at that stage, asking the sort of kind of the questions, and for whatever reason, I don't think we particularly saw eye to eye. And then basically took 2 questions after the Andorra thing, and then basically just one of which was for me, and then basically got up and then basically just had another bit of a rant, didn't he? And then basically, whenever there's a clip of Steve McLaren replayed on Sky, you can see a picture of me at the front. It's not looking great, laughing as Steve McLaren exits stage right. I mean, it's just it's not a great look. And then I think he boarded the bus. And then basically suggested to the driver that he should try and run over one of the journalists who was leaving the stadium.
Which one was that?
Brian Warner. No.
Oh, right.
Late, great Brian. But it wasn't working out for Steve, and obviously it didn't work. I have to say we've buried the hatchet since. But I miss that. I miss those days, really, because I don't mind it. I think it's quite
you love a rant, don't you, Crossy?
Well, I love
a rant, and I tell you what I do love. I love a rant, and I love a row, which doesn't appear 2 minutes later on blooming Twitter. Well, exactly. I think that's a shame. That's a shame, because I think you should be able to have a good old ding dong with someone, lay your cards on the table, get everything off your chest, and then basically, move on. I love a good row.
Yeah. We don't live in that world anymore, though, do we?
No. And I think what a sorry state of affairs. And Lampard, even towards the end of the Lampard reign, had a go at someone. Why does that then need to be on social media? Why? Yeah. I think that's such a shame.
Plus, I mean, it goes back, John. You mentioned it, and you mentioned Woolley, for example, and it was him and a lot of the reporters, which they should do. If you're going to write something about them, and you front them up in the press conference. And Woolley, for example, would always make a point of being front row, centre of front row. I mean, basically, and I think the managers like that as well. And I think that's why, I don't know about you guys, but some managers I've spoken to, I mean, are quite, believe it or not, looking forward to getting back to when the conferences aren't on Zoom anymore.
Gareth Southgate is, isn't he? Gareth Southgate is, he really is. I think he's looking forward to having us.
Can't imagine Gareth having much of a rank, can you?
No, I can't. But I he was in front of the firing squad, wasn't he? After the Gomez Sterling round, do you remember that one?
Yes,
that got as feisty as it did. And then I must say, I always think there was Matt Law, from the Telegraph recently raised a good one, sort of calling out a few sort of journalists on Twitter, and I actually agree with him. Really, basically, there's so many people absolutely slaughtering Jose Mourinho in the months of this year, and then basically I have to say that actually do it to his face. I'm not saying call him out over this and stuff, but come on, the next press conference, ask a question along those lines. Put those points to him, and they don't, and that's more shame them. And it's so easy to go on social media and do that. And I just think if you've got a point, if you've got a gripe, front it up. Don't grandstand, but front it up. Anyway, I digress, and I'm ranting now myself. But there you go.
Yeah.
But I love those rants, and I miss them.
But of course, just very, very quickly. Obviously, Keegan's rant was aimed at not a journalist, but at Sir Alex Ferguson.
Sir Alex,
So we'll have to maybe next time think of when managers have ranted at other managers, and just very quickly, of course, it wasn't a rant, but when Kenny said, when he was holding his young daughter and suggested she spoke more sense than Fergie, that was one of the great sort of mini sort of rants going. And I think that's what was interesting about this, is that you very rarely see one manager absolutely calling out another manager.
No. Yeah.
Although Mourinho, Wenger obviously is a...
Yeah, Wenger and Fergie was a good one, wasn't it?
Wenger and Fergie.
Wenger, I was there for the
Fergie
time.
keeps cropping up in these,
said
doesn't he?
that basically everyone thinks they've got the prettiest wife at home, which,
yes.
I know for a fact that was the moment that tipped it, bosh, and lit the blue touch paper, and their relationship was never the same again, although they're friends now. Anyway, guys, it's been so interesting, such good fun. And a lot of perception talk, a lot of journalist chat, and I hope everyone found it really interesting. So I certainly did. It was great. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for everyone listening and watching.
So I'm not...